This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 327 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Today's episode is about rare encounters with nature on your travels. Firstly, I'd like to pay my respects to the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, where I'm recording this podcast. We are heading towards the dry and hot Noongar season of Birak, which is, I must say, one of my least favourite times of the year. Too hot just does not suit me. But right now we are enjoying the last days of the season of Kambarang, which includes lots of dry, clear weather, but not too hot. It's my perfect time of year and I love to be out and about in it. So speaking of nature, this episode, of course, is all about some of the more unusual or rare encounters we can be lucky enough to have with nature on our travels. So we've got some various animal encounters and even a tree story. So without further ado, my first guest in this episode is Satyajit Das. Das has a keen interest in wildlife and has had really some truly magical encounters on his travels over the years. In this particular story, he tells me about some especially lucky encounters with the small cats of South America.
Everybody likes predators. They like lions, leopards, tigers, and they're actually quite a small part of the population of cats in the world. And we fell in love with small cats a long time ago. And there's three in South America or Central America as well that you see. The main one is the ocelot. And these are all spotted cats. So they're all yellowish like a leopard with spots or rosettes as it's technically known. And the ocelot is the larger. The second one is the margay, and the smallest one is the onchilla. And they're like all predators, but they obviously, because of their size, hunt smaller game, small mammals, birds, and reptiles and things like that. Now, they're all hard to see. They're nocturnal and they're very shy. So they're quite hard to see. We've been traveling long enough to know that going looking for something like this is a waste of time. You can go to an area where they are and hope that they turn up. And anyway, in Venezuela, we did see ocelots quite well, and that was fine. And I sort of said 1 out of 3, pretty good. I'm not going to see the margay or the onchilla in my life. Anyway, we were in Colombia in about 2015, and we're staying at this place along a river. And it's a lovely, lovely little reserve. And it's run by the local community, which is very special. And the local community gets some money out of it. The guides are local. Anyway, we had our own guide, but there was the local guide as well. And we were going to go out in the morning. And this is to see a species of quail. Now, seeing a species of quail like this is kind of stretching the truth a little bit, because you hear them, they make this amazing cackling noise, and then they're in large coveys. Coveys is just a term for the group, and there's like probably 15 to 20 of them, and they're dark coloured, and they just scoot across the path. And I mean scoot. They're going at a rate of knots. So all you hear is this cackle, 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 and suddenly this black shape runs across. Right. So anyway, our guide was sensible, said, you guys want to see this, the local guide will take you. There's a good spot for them just behind where you're staying. So we went out, and sure enough, they cackled, ran across, and Jade's my partner, and I looked at each other. I said, I don't think we're going to get a better view, do you? And the guide said, that is a good view. What you got was a good view. So I thought, that's good.
Yeah, happy with that.
Anyway, so we sort of walk back to the place for breakfast, the normal thing that tourists like to do, eat. And so as we're walking back, the guide's name was Manuel, and Manuel suddenly stops and squints into the bushes, and I'm sort of trying to follow where he's looking. And then he says, in a very soft, gentle voice, there's a cat. Now, to me, I thought, bloody hell, there must be a cat at the hacienda where we were staying. What's it doing out here? And I follow his eyes, and sitting on a tree is this beautiful spotted cat.
No way.
And I said to Manuel very softly, I said, Manuel, that looks like a margay. And he said, I think you might be right. I said, don't you know? He said, I've never seen one before, so I'm not sure. And it's completely relaxed. It's just looking at us. after a while, it adjusted its position. And the moment it did, I knew it was a margay, because margays have these double-jointed legs. They can go down trees. How most cats go down with their head up and sort of scramble down. Not margays. Margays go down head first.
Wow.
And the other thing they have is this beautiful, very large tail. And it's a very long, fluffy tail. And when it moved, I could see the tail. And I said, that's got to be a margay.
Amazing.
And the size, everything is right. So anyway, we spent about 20 minutes and then we said, let's leave it alone. And we walk back and we get back to breakfast and we say to our guide, we saw a margay. He said, no, you can't see a margay. That's not possible. I said, have you seen a margay? He said, no. And I said, well, if I was you, this is your one chance in a lifetime probably to see one. I'd go out there and see it. It's probably still there. Anyway, he sort of goes out and he comes back and says, you know what? It's a margay. I said, I told you it's a margay. So why did you doubt me? Through the morning, for the next about 30 minutes, everybody in the lodge sort of troops out there to see this one margay and come back. And eventually it just sort of came down and disappeared apparently. But it was just extraordinary. But later on, I sort of said, 2 out of 3, I'm pushing my luck here. It's not going to happen again.
Surely.
Anyway, we go to Brazil actually quite recently in 2022. And there's a lovely park called Itatiaia, which is actually near Sao Paulo on the coast. And it's the oldest national park in Brazil. Anyway, we go there and we were there looking for birds. And we drive up this mountain road with our guide, who's a delightful man called Frederico. Frederico and we are great friends now. We've traveled with him several times. And he's got this wonderful phrase for everything. Fantastica. When you see something, there's this amazing utterance. Fantastico, it comes out. Anyway, so we're driving along doing nothing about much. And suddenly something crosses the road. And I was sitting in the front seat and Frederico was driving. Jade's in the back seat. And I say, what's that? And all of us the car stops and we're all staring at this tiny little cat, which is crossing the road. And it stops on the left-hand side of the road, very carefully looks at us, and then just slowly wanders into the bushes. And I said, Fred, is it possible that's an onchilla? He said, I'm absolutely sure it's an onchilla because they've got an unusually shaped head.
Right. Oh, wow.
Anyway, we're all sort of going, oh, this is amazing. But mind you, it was for like 15 seconds, and with most of these small animals, cats anyway, you don't get great long views.
It's a glimpse.
Certainly, it's a glimpse. Anyway, so I said to Fred, you must have seen an onchilla before. And he looks at me with a grin on his face. He said, I've been doing this for 30 years. And I've been in Itatiaia probably hundreds and hundreds of times. I have never seen an onchilla here. And later on, we met a photographer who works in the park, and we were chatting to him. He's actually Australian, believe it or not. He's married to a Brazilian woman. He's an artist, actually. He lives there, actually in the park. And we said to him we said we saw an onchilla. He said, you know what? I've seen one a couple of times at night cross the road, and he actually uses camera traps to monitor animals. Right. And he said, occasionally they turn up on there. So they're there, but you never see them. You never see them. They're ghost cats. I call these all ghost cats because we know they're there, but, you never quite ever see them.
And you have. Amazing.
Well, I've been very, very privileged. I've been very, very privileged.
Oh, so lucky. Incredible. When you're there with guides who've been there for decades and never seen them, and then you're there at that moment, that is super special.
Yeah, I think there's almost like a bit of envy on their part. Like, I've been doing this for so long. Yeah. But how come you turn up and they turn up in front of you? It's sort of like, it's unfair. Yes. It's just completely unfair.
You haven't put in the work.
No, you haven't done the hours. How come you get to see it and I put in all the hours? It's all luck. In the end, it's all luck. It's pure luck.
Yeah. But wow, such special experiences. Amazing. As a cat lover, I am very thrilled for Das to have had these encounters. Very, very lucky indeed. Now, our next nature encounter is completely different. You may remember Paul Christie, who is the CEO of Walk Japan from previous chats. And this is a story that Paul told me I couldn't fit in our other episodes, but was able to save for this kind of collection of unusual nature encounters. And it's about one of my favourite natural experiences, which is seeing the sakura or cherry blossoms in Japan.
I'm not really big on sakura, the cherry blossom. I mean,
Interesting.
I don't mind it. It's not my favourite thing in Japan by a long shot. But I know it's a big thing amongst Japanese and amongst many people who want to visit Japan. So they want to come at the cherry blossom season. It starts in about February in Okinawa and then moves up Japan to Hokkaido for about May. But for most people, they think of Kyoto, which will be the end of March, early April for the cherry blossom in usual circumstances. But I know a place in where you'd see the cherry blossom in the autumn. So, I don't know, September maybe.
Wow.
It was October. I can't remember which now. I just thought maybe this is some weird aberration of the cherry blossom. Well, fast forward, I was introduced to a book by a Japanese lady recently. I actually have it here on the desk, who wrote about a British person who, as it says, or an Englishman here it says, who saved Japan's blossoms being the cherry blossoms.
Uh-huh.
This gentleman's his nickname was Cherry Ingram. And he, in his book, or this lady, Naoko Abe, wrote about Cherry Ingram and how he helped Japan save many varietals of cherry blossom. There's really, most cherry blossom we know of are all propagated. They're not naturally occurring cherry blossom. And there were many, many different varieties, different blossoms, sometimes coloring was different. And when they blossomed was different. This was something which was a thing amongst the daimyo, so the more senior samurai, the lords of a region. And in their gardens, the Edo period, I think, was one of the most fascinating periods of Japanese history, partly because it was largely peaceful, and which means peace normally brings economic prosperity, time to do other things besides sharpening your sword and stabbing each other, blowing each other's heads off or whatever it was, and developing culture. And the Edo period has had a massive impact on modern Japan, which I think is always understated because Kyoto's the cultural capital of Japan. Well, it is, but actually Kyoto's before the Edo period. What we know of Japan now, much of it comes from the Edo period. Anyway, that's another story. But during this period, one of those things was, the daimyo would try and have, they didn't necessarily do it themselves, but their gardeners would be propagating new varietals of cherry blossom. And there were many, many, many different types. And Cherry Ingram went to Japan firstly, I think, in the early 20th century, and this was something that caught his attention. But he also realized, especially when he was talking to Japanese of the day who were interested in the cherry blossoms, that they were dying out because the samurai gardens were dying off. There was no need for them anymore because the whole system had collapsed with the New Japan had emerged from sort of late 1860s, and the Meiji Restoration. And when everything was, we'll return Western now, we don't need the old system, et cetera, et cetera. And so this is something I learned, in the last few months, that there's actually much more to cherry than we're allowed to believe. Now, the reason there is this idea that cherries happen sort of at certain times of the year, depending on where you are in Japan, is actually a man-made construct. The Japanese government, they wanted a sort of an ideal of cherry for a variety of reasons. And so this particular variety called Yoshino became very common. And of course, the same variety tends to blossom at the same time, assuming the same latitude and all the rest of it. So that's why you have this. There is this cherry blossom. It's only a very small part of a much bigger story. So that's the biggest thing I learned this year about Japan. And of much more interest in cherry because of that, cherry blossom because of that. Yeah.
So you heard it here, probably first. Well, first time I'd heard it. You can see cherry blossoms blooming in Japan, not just in the springtime, but in autumn or fall. And I think I'm going to try that out. It's a beautiful time to be in Japan and a lot less busy than traditional cherry blossom season. So I'm going to go hunting for these other kinds of cherry blossom trees. Now, my final guest today is Iris Villarreal, and she describes an incredible experience in the far west of Mongolia, on the border with China and Kazakhstan. And Iris went to stay with a nomadic group who are an ethnic minority of Kazakhs living in Mongolia, up very high in the mountains. And Iris timed her visit for the eagle hunting season and learnt all about how they train their eagles to hunt. She learnt, for example, it takes anywhere from a few months to a year to train an eagle, and they use female eagles for this work during the eagle's non-reproductive years, which is kind of interestingly sustainable. So anyway, you'll learn a bit more. Iris told me about her experiences learning about and seeing this eagle training, and completely fascinating. So here's Iris.
So this is how they start training their eagle. They have it on a special diet. The eagle basically is with the family. Obviously, one eagle per hunter, but there's their family life. They live in their tent, which has a circular form, and it's either outside the tent or inside as well, and is fed with meat. They also use they cover the head of the eagle with a handmade leather cap, so the eyes are covered. Well, usually when animals have their eyes covered and they remain, they're not in hunting mode. They also don't get spooked or anything.
They're calmer.
They're much calmer, exactly. But during training, they take this head cover off, and they, there's not only one person. Sometimes there's more than one person. Somebody is watching the eagle on a higher place. They drive with their horse. They start in lower places, but then eventually they drive with their horses to the mountains, and they place the eagle in higher places, and they start with the recall until the eagle gets conditioned or used enough to things moving. And, they have to, it's basically a very primal instinct to just chase things that are moving until the eagle is basically trained. So it knows that it has to come to this person when it's making such sounds, but they're always using, say, meat or a carcass or a part of an animal to call the eagle. Eventually, when you take it, maybe sometimes, they gather more than one person, and somebody has a more experienced eagle, somebody has a less experienced eagle. And this is also not necessarily that they learn from each other, but I think they start exposing the new bird to a more complex situation where you have the other eagle chasing an actual running live animal. And the hunt is also interesting because you have chasers, which is basically people on horseback. And you also have the people with the eagles. So the people once they go to the mountains, the chasers stay a little bit lower and they try to flush any hidden, because the hidden animals, they're camouflaging very well, like foxes or
So they try and kind of push them up the hill so that they become more visible to the eagles.
Well, actually, they're trying to push them down the hill. So the eagle, because the eagle will be hunting from top down.
Right. Okay. Got it.
So the eagle is high, and the hunter, all of them are hunters, but the guy with the eagle stays high, whereas the chasers go a little bit lower. Right. So if they see anything, this animal runs down the mountain.
Got it. Okay.
And when this animal basically comes out of their little hiding place, the eagle is released and then sees the animal and chases it. And we're lucky if it catches it. Sometimes, it can miss, or we're talking about wildlife. So, the prey also can defend itself.
Yeah.
So as fast as the eagle catches something, and these eagles are huge and their claws are also very powerful. As soon as the eagle catches something, then these men on horse, mostly men, I know that there's some girls now joining too, but they basically run down the mountain. They're expert horse riders on horseback, basically to help. The eagle doesn't kill the prey usually, so they have to go and get the prey and get the eagle back.
So the eagle will... So they'll recall the eagle after it's grabbed a fox or something, and the eagle will return to them, or?
It's not even recall at that point. They have to get to where the eagle is on the ground with the prey. So they have to get there. They have to get it from the eagle. Say if the eagle is left up on the top of the mountain and the owner goes down and calls the eagle, then the eagle should fly down. But when the eagle is actually hunted and is caught something, then the chasers and the guy, everybody have to go there to help the eagle.
Got it.
Sometimes you have more than one animal hunting. Sometimes you have 2 eagles, 3 eagles, when it's a bigger prey. Because imagine like a wolf. This is not always successful. Sometimes the prey manages to escape. When I was there, the eagle caught a fox. The eagle rolled with the fox down the hill, caught the fox, and they literally rolled like a ball down the hill. The fox managed to escape, basically kind of managed to wound a little bit the paw of the eagle and escaped. Nothing happened really to the eagle, but the eagle released the fox and the fox escaped. So obviously this is, you can spend literally a whole day hunting and you may come back home with nothing.
With nothing. Yeah.
But it was very interesting, very beautiful to watch. But the entire process of going on horseback to the mountain, then spotting the animals, if you spot an animal. So the actual hunt, like the whole point of this, it only lasts a few seconds. And it's okay. It's a happy moment if they do catch something, but you don't always catch something. So I really think there's a little bit of merit in all of that, the training, the bond. And essentially once they've used this animal for a few winters, the hunter prepares the eagle, feeds it so that it's quite fat or to be released. And it's usually released not in winter, but a little bit before when it's still warmer, so that the animal can just basically get on being free.
Yeah, and has the best chance of surviving. And
Exactly.
Amazing, hey. Now, actually, as I listened to Iris, I could picture an ad, which I think is for a bank, that was playing repeatedly on Singapore Airlines on their entertainment system on my flights earlier this year. It featured a group of people which seemed to me to be in these mountains using their eagles for hunting. So if you've been flying on Singapore Air this year, you might have seen this ad, or perhaps it also played elsewhere. It must be. So yes, let me know if you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, thank you so much for listening to episode 327 of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. If you have your own rare, unusual, unique nature experiences, do let me know about them. I love this topic. You can chat to me in our Facebook group for Thoughtful Travellers or our LinkedIn group for Thoughtful Travellers. Just search for Thoughtful Travellers or go to the links in the show notes for these and you will find them. Or find me on Instagram at Amanda Kendall, Amanda Kendle. Massive thank you to my guests. I spoke first with Satyajit Das. Das is the author of a new book called Wild Quests, Journeys into Ecotourism and the Future for Animals, which is all about his many experiences over the years. And I'll leave a link in the show notes so you can find out about that book more. Thanks also to Paul Christie, CEO of Walk Japan. And you can see some of the walks that they could take you on, potentially past cherry blossoms at several times of year, at walkjapan.com. And finally, I chatted with Iris Villarreal, and you can find Iris on Instagram at OutVentureNow. I'll also leave a link in the show notes to the book that Paul Christie mentions called Cherry Ingram, The Englishman Who Saved Japan's Blossoms. It's by Naoko Abe, and it sounds super interesting. If you want to hear more from me and keep in touch with what's going on in Thoughtful Travel Land, you can sign up for the Thoughtful Travellers newsletter at Substack. Just go to thoughtfultravel.substack.com and you will find the sign up. All of these details and more will be in the show notes. And for this episode, show notes are at notaballerina.com/327. As always, thank you so much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.